The snow fell upon the Sussex Downs with a quiet, relentless determination, transforming Westway's manor into a confection of white icing and dark, skeletal hedges. It was a picture of serene isolation, which made the violence within its grounds all the more shocking. Inside the manor, the atmosphere was one of strained merriment. The party, a small select gathering, was the idea of the host, Sir Claude Weatherby, a man whose vast fortune, derived from somewhat obscure colonial enterprises, was matched only by his passion for acquiring beautiful things. Tonight, however, the prize was not a new artwork, but an agreement. After months of negotiation, he was to finally secure the sanguine scarab, a legendary Egyptian pectoral of fabled rubies and gold, from the renowned, if perpetually anxious, archaeologist Dr. Alexander Finch. The drawing room was a testament to Sir Claude's acquisitions. Heavy Tudor furniture jostled with delicate chinoiserie cabinets. A suit of armor stood sentinel beside a modern, garish abstract painting. The guests, like the decor, were an eclectic mix. Dr. Finch, a small man with nervous, fluttering hands, repeatedly polished his spectacles, his eyes darting towards the attach case at his feet. His wife Eleanor, tall and austerely beautiful, watched him with an expression of weary impatience. The potential buyer, a sleek American financier named Hannigan, lounged by the fire, swirling brandy and making loud pronouncements about the scarab's investment potential. Overseeing the room with an air of pained propriety was Miss Caroline Prentice, Sir Claude's efficient and quietly formidable secretary. Completing the party was the local vicar, a kindly old man who seemed mildly bewildered to be there, and the sharp-eyed, acerbic Lady Margaret Meg Clifford, Sir Claude's sister, whose needlepoint concealed a tongue like a stiletto. The tension was not solely about the impending sale. Sir Claude, a large, boisterous man with a florid face and a laugh that could shake crystal, had a gift for manipulation. He enjoyed needling his guests, poking at their secrets as if they were curios in his collection. He had made a sly allusion to Dr. Finch's disputed professional credentials, questioned Hannigan's actual liquidity, and remarked on Miss Prentice's unfortunate family history. The only one who gave as good as she got was his sister Meg. "Do try not to bully the vicar, Claude," she said without looking up from her embroidery. "Heaven is one acquisition you cannot strong-arm." Sir Claude merely laughed. "Nonsense, Meg. Everything has its price, even salvation. Ask Dr. Finch. He knows the value of a dusty relic." It was after this exchange, around 10 o'clock, that Sir Claude declared he needed air to clear the fug of finance from the room. He donned his heavy greatcoat and, with a theatrical flourish, announced he would take a turn in the winter garden, a large, glass-paned conservatory attached to the south side of the house, filled with exotic, overwintering plants. "I insist on going alone," he boomed, waving away Hannigan's half-hearted offer to join him. "One must commune with nature, even if it is under glass. I shall return in 10 minutes, and we shall conclude our business, Finch." He strode out through the French windows. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in a muffling silence. The 10 minutes stretched to 15. Then 20. A vague unease settled over the party. Miss Prentice, frowning at the clock, was the first to voice it. "Sir Claude is never late for a financial transaction. Perhaps the old rogue is trying to make us sweat," chuckled Hannigan, though his eyes were on the attach case. "I don't like it," said Dr. Finch, his voice thin. "The snow, it's so quiet." It was Lady Meg who finally stood, her embroidery falling to the floor. "Oh, for heaven's sake. I'll fetch him. He's probably admiring his precious orchid and lost all track of time." She marched to the French windows, pulled them open, and stepped out onto the terrace. A gust of icy air swirled into the warm room. They saw her dark shape move along the flagstone path, now covered in a smooth inch of snow, towards the glowing glass panels of the winter garden. She opened the conservatory door and disappeared inside. The scream that followed was not loud or hysterical. It was a short, sharp exhalation of pure horror, perfectly audible in the frozen stillness. It brought everyone to their feet. They found her just inside the door, one gloved hand pressed to her mouth. Beyond her, under the grotesque, sprawling shadow of a giant Brazilian fern, lay Sir Claude Weatherby. He was on his back, his greatcoat splayed open. His eyes were wide with surprise, staring at the glass ceiling and the falling snow beyond. The hilt of an ornate, jewel-handled Malay Kris dagger, a recent acquisition he had been showing off before dinner, protruded from the center of his chest. The dark, spreading stain on his white shirt was vivid against the lush green foliage. But the most arresting detail, the one that made the vicar gasp and Hannigan curse, was not the body itself. It was the garden. The flagstone path from the house was a single, unbroken line of Lady Meg's footprints in the pristine snow. And around the conservatory, a perfect, undisturbed white blanket stretched to the walls of the manor. No one had approached or left the winter garden. No one, save Sir Claude himself and, now, his sister. The murderer, it seemed, had not come through the snow. And yet there they were, all accounted for in the drawing room. The weapon was from the house. The opportunity was impossibly narrow. The scene proclaimed its own terrible, illogical truth. In a house full of people, each with a motive to dislike, fear, or hate the victim, Sir Claude Weatherby had been killed in a locked room of snow. Chaos of a peculiarly English and stifled variety ensued. The vicar, after his initial gasp, began to murmur prayers. Dr. Finch turned a sickly shade of grey and seemed on the verge of fainting, steadied only by his wife's firm, unyielding grip on his elbow. The American, Hannigan, was the first to move forward, his financier's mind assessing the scene as if it were a broken contract. "Don't touch anything." Lady Meg's command sliced through the murmurs. She had recovered her composure, though her knuckles were white where she gripped the doorframe. "The police. We must call the police." "The telephone lines are down," Miss Caroline Prentice said, her voice eerily calm. She had not entered the conservatory, but stood in the terrace doorway, a neat, dark silhouette against the warm light of the drawing room. The snow, and likely the wind. "I tried to place a call to the village just before Sir Claude went out. The exchange reported the lines were dead. We are quite cut off." A profound silence greeted this announcement, broken only by the soft hiss of snow against glass. They were isolated, trapped in a manor house with a corpse, a murderer, and a priceless artifact. "The scarab," Dr. Finch whispered, his eyes darting frantically from the body to his attach case, still beside his chair in the drawing room. Hannigan was already striding back inside. He snatched up the case, flipped the latches, and opened it. His face hardened. Empty. A fresh wave of shock rippled through the group. The sanguine scarab was gone. Murder had been compounded by grand theft. It was Miss Prentice who took practical charge, demonstrating the efficiency Sir Claude had relied upon. "Vicar," she said, "please go to the kitchen, inform Mrs. Henderson the cook, and remain there. We must all gather in the library. It is the most central room. No one is to be alone. Lady Meg, if you could." She gestured to the body. Lady Meg understood. With a stiff nod, she backed out of the conservatory, pulling the door shut. The terrible scene was hidden, but its presence vibrated in the cold air. She then led the stunned procession back into the drawing room and through to the oak-paneled library. A large fire blazed, its cheerfulness now grotesque. They were a portrait of suspicion. Seated in a high-backed chair near the fire, Dr. Finch shivered uncontrollably, though his wife, standing behind him like a guardian statue, showed no such weakness. Her face was a mask of cold disdain. Hannigan paced before the hearth, shooting accusatory glances at everyone. Lady Meg had resumed her needlepoint, her stitches sharp and precise, a facade of normalcy. Miss Prentice stood by the door, a silent sentinel. "We must secure the scene," Miss Prentice said, "and we must search the house." "Search the house?" Eleanor Finch's voice was icy. "For the scarab? Or for a blood-stained killer? Are we to turn on each other with accusations?" "It is the logical course," Miss Prentice replied. "The item is missing. It cannot have vanished into the air. Someone in this house took it. But the murder," the vicar quavered, having returned from the kitchen. "No one could have reached the conservatory. The snow, dear heaven, the snow is untouched. That was the impossible, inescapable fact. It bound them together more tightly than any locked door. The unbroken expanse of white surrounding the winter garden was a testimony to their collective guilt, or collective innocence. No one could decide which. Perhaps Sir Claude took the scarab with him," suggested Hannigan, "and the thief killed him for it out there." "He did not," stated Lady Meg, not looking up from her work. "I saw him place it back in its velvet case after his little display before dinner. He was a showman, not a fool. He wouldn't risk it in the damp." "Then the thief," said Miss Prentice, "must have retrieved it from the drawing-room after he left, and then, by some means, committed the murder without leaving a trace in the snow." "Which is impossible," Dr. Finch bleated. "So we are back to the beginning." "Nothing is impossible," said Eleanor Finch, her gaze sweeping the room. "Only improbable. Someone has engineered this, someone with a cool head and a clever plan." The atmosphere thickened with mutual fear and accusation. The motives, which had been mere undercurrents at dinner, now floated to the surface, ugly and exposed. Dr. Finch was deeply in debt. The sale of the scarab was his salvation. Sir Claude had been driving a brutally hard bargain, threatening at the last moment to expose Finch's past ethical indiscretions, to ruin his reputation entirely. Hannigan's offer was Sir Claude's leverage. But what if the American and the archaeologist had conspired to cut out the middleman? Or what if Hannigan's finances were as shaky as Sir Claude had insinuated, and he needed the scarab to cover his debts? Lady Meg stood to inherit a significant portion of her brother's estate. Their mutual dislike was no secret. She had often spoken of his vulgar accumulation and longed for the quiet, orderly life the manor had known in their parents' day. Miss Prentice Sir Claude held some power over her, a hinted at unfortunate family history he occasionally used to ensure her loyalty. What was that history? And had her loyalty finally snapped? Even Eleanor Finch was a question. Was her weary patience with her husband merely a cover for a deeper ambition, or a simmering resentment? The vicar was the only one without apparent motive, which, as Poirot would later remark, sometimes made for the most interesting suspect of all. For now, they sat in the oppressive silence of the library, listening to the wind moan around the manor walls. They were a closed circle, bound by the falling snow and the dark stains spreading under the Brazilian fern. The local constable from the village, when he could eventually be summoned, would be utterly out of his depth. They all felt it. This was a case requiring a particular kind of mind, one that could reconcile an impossible murder with a very tangible theft. It was Lady Meg who finally gave voice to the unspoken conclusion. She set her needlepoint aside with a sigh. "This is a mess." a vulgar, chaotic mess. Claude would have hated the lack of style in it. She looked directly at Miss Prentice. "Caroline, you have that directory. There is only one person who can untangle this sort of odious knot. We must get a message through to London. We must call for Hercule Poirot." The following afternoon, the snow had ceased, but the world remained gripped in white silence. A royal blue Rolls-Royce, looking profoundly out of place, carved a slow, determined path up the long drive to Westways Manor. Within, seated in immaculate comfort, Hercule Poirot observed the isolating landscape with a faint frown of disapproval. Disorder, whether in a drawing-room or upon the countryside, was offensive to the soul. He was met at the door by Miss Prentice, her demeanor one of controlled relief. "Monsieur Poirot, thank you for coming. The wires were restored only this morning. The local constabulary is here, but they are out of their depth. That is often the case where the footprints are not only in the snow, but also upon the cerebellum," Poirot replied, allowing her to take his astrakhan coat and meticulously straighten the scarf placed atop it on the stand. His eyes, bright and observant, took in the grand cluttered hall. "The scene. It remains intact? The conservatory is sealed. The body has been removed to the cold larder on the instructions of the police surgeon. The guests remain in the library. Tout fait. Led on, mademoiselle." In the library, the atmosphere was one of exhaustion and heightened tension. The arrival of the great detective acted as a stimulant. Dr. Finch leaned forward with nervous hope. Hannigan assessed him with cool appraisal. Lady Meg's gaze was sharp and curious. Eleanor Finch simply looked wary. The local inspector, a red-faced man named Gange, stepped forward, bristling with territorial insecurity. "Monsieur Poirot?" "Inspector Gange. We've made a preliminary examination. Clear-cut case, in my view. Is it?" Poirot asked, his tone politely neutral. "That is singular. The snow. It presented no difficulty for your theory?" "The snow is the key," said Inspector Grange, swelling slightly. "Only 2 sets of footprints, Sir Claude's going out and Lady Margaret's going to find him. No one else approached. Therefore, the only person who could have planted that dagger was Lady Margaret Clifford." A collective intake of breath. Lady Meg did not flinch. She merely raised an eyebrow. "Ridiculous. Why would I scream and summon everyone if I had just killed him? To establish your discovery of the body." A classic stratagem. Poirot held up a small, perfectly manicured hand. "A moment. I pray you, Inspector. The footprints, you have studied them with care?" "Of course. Clear as day. And the direction of Sir Claude's prints? They went from this house to the conservatory. Did they return?" Inspector Grange blinked. "Well, no. He was killed out there, so his prints show a determined stride, perhaps? Or a meander? Were they deep, shallow, evenly spaced? Did they show hesitation? And Lady Margaret's prints, do they walk briskly or run? Do they overlap his? These details, they are the alphabet of the crime. Without them, one cannot read the sentence." "Flustered," Grange admitted. "Well, the snow was falling. Details were obscured. Ah, non. The snow is the page upon which the story is written. To ignore the font is to misread the book." Poirot turned his attention to the room. "I will examine the winter garden now. Alone, if you please. Then I will speak with each of you. It is the method, the order, that produces the clarity. His presence had already shifted the balance of power." Inspector Grange, deflated, gave a curt nod. Poirot, with a slight bow to the assembled suspects, followed Miss Prentice back to the drawing-room and the fateful French windows. He stood on the threshold, his eyes missing nothing. he observed the single line of Lady Meg's footprints, now fringed with a light dusting of fresh snow. Beyond, the unbroken white expanse surrounding the glass structure gleamed under a pale sun. It was, as described, a perfect locked room. With fastidious care, avoiding the existing path, Poirot took a circuitous route, his own black patent leather shoes sinking into the virgin snow. He circled the conservatory at a distance. No footprints, no marks, no disturbance. Every pane of glass was intact. The only door was the one Lady Meg had used. He entered. The humid, fragrant air was tainted with a metallic hint. The dark stain on the flagstones beneath the fern was a vulgar blot on the orderly greenery. Poirot's gaze swept the interior, the potted plants, the stone benches, the irrigation system. His eyes lingered on the high, curved roof and the network of slender iron struts that held the glass. He spent 10 minutes in silent contemplation, then returned to the drawing room, his face inscrutable. Inspector Grange awaited him. "Well, you see the impossibility? It has to be the sister." "What I see, Inspector, is a problem that has been presented with too much neatness. The untouched snow, the missing jewel, the weapon from the house. It is all so theatrical." Hercule Poirot, he mistrusts the theatre. Life, it is not so symmetrical. Come, we will interview the inhabitants. We begin with the efficient Miss Prentice. The foundation of a house, it must be understood before one admires the gables. He had arrived, assessed the stage, and found the official explanation wanting. The little grey cells were now engaged. The meticulous unraveling had begun. Poirot chose the morning room for his interviews. A small, sunlit space that felt detached from the gloom of the library and the opulent clutter of the main house. He sat in a straight-backed chair behind a delicate escritoire, placing his gloves and cane with geometric precision before him. Miss Caroline Prentice was shown in first, per his instruction. "Mademoiselle Prentice, I thank you for your efficiency in these distressing circumstances. Please, be seated. You are the eyes and ears of this household, are you not? Then let us begin with the foundation." Miss Prentice sat, her back not touching the chair. "I will assist in any way I can, Monsieur Poirot. Bon. Describe for me the events of last evening, from the conclusion of dinner until the moment of the scream. Omit no detail, however trivial it may seem to you." She gave a concise, clear account, the gathering in the drawing room, the display of the scarab, Sir Claude's verbal jabs at his guests, his decision to take air, his exit, the growing unease, and her own attempt to telephone. Her narrative matched what Poirot had already heard. But her delivery was cool, uninflected. This attempt to telephone, it was before Sir Claude departed? It was approximately 5 minutes before. I went to the study to confirm the time of the legal assistant's arrival for the morning. The line was dead. And the scarab? Where was it during this time? In its open case on the low table in the drawing room. Sir Claude had left it there. Everyone present could see it. You returned to the drawing room. Did you observe anyone near the table? No. Dr. Finch was seated by it, staring into the fire. His wife was standing at the window. Mr. Hannigan was by the brandy decanter. Lady Margaret was embroidering. And then Sir Claude left. Did he say anything specific to you? A hesitation, brief but perceptible. He said, "Keep an eye on the vultures, Caroline." It was his typical manner. Vultures. An interesting choice. Did you feel he anticipated danger? Not physical danger. Financial maneuvering, perhaps. He enjoyed the game of it. Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Mademoiselle, you have been in Sir Claude's employ for how long?" 7 years, a significant period. He relied upon you. And yet, it is suggested he held some power over you? A piece of your past? Her composure did not crack, but a fractional tightness appeared around her eyes. "My past is not a secret. My brother was implicated in a fraud case. Sir Claude knew of it. He offered me employment when others might not. He was not above reminding me of that debt, but it was not power in a sinister sense. Her tone implied the subject was closed. Poirot shifted tack. The snow. Mademoiselle. A remarkable barrier. In your opinion, is there any way a person could have reached that conservatory without leaving a trace? No. It is impossible. I have considered every alternative. The walls are sheer. The roof is glass. There is no other door. And yet, a man is dead. Therefore, the impossible must be possible. You are a logical person. Think, if you wished to create the illusion of an impossible crime, how would you do it? For the first time, a flicker of something beyond cool efficiency showed in her face, a spark of intellectual engagement. I would seek to manipulate the perception of the evidence, to make people believe the snow was undisturbed when it was not. Persistent. Perception. Thank you, Mademoiselle. You may send in Dr. Finch. The archaeologist was a bundle of nerves. His account was fragmented, peppered with self-justifications about the scarab's provenance and his own financial straits. He was ruining me. But I didn't kill him. I needed the sale to go through. The scarab. Doctor, when did you last see it in its case? When Claude put it back. I never went near the table after that. I couldn't bear to look at it, knowing how he was torturing me. And the snow? Does your scientific mind offer a solution? None. It's a phantom, a curse. Like the curse on the tomb where we found the scarab. He seemed to genuinely believe it. Eleanor Finch, in contrast, was a study in contained impatience. Alexander is a brilliant man, but weak. Sir Claude was a bully. I despised him for what he was doing to my husband. But murder? It is a messy, unprofitable business. She claimed she had remained at the window the entire time, watching the snow fall. She had seen nothing, and no one. Hannigan was brash and confrontational. Look, the old boy was crooked. He was squeezing Finch to drop the price, then planning to sell to me at a markup. Maybe Finch figured it out. Maybe the sister wanted the estate. My money's on her. The snow? Maybe she's a witch. He laughed without humor. He admitted examining the empty attach case, but denied touching the scarab earlier. Why would I? The deal was almost done. Lady Margaret Clifford was Poirot's final interview of the session. She was as sharp as her needle. I did not kill my brother, Monsieur Poirot, though I often considered boxing his ears. He was a vulgarian, but he was family, and I am not a fool. If I had planned to kill him, I would not have done it in such a melodramatic fashion, and I certainly would not have screamed my head off and drawn a crowd. Your footprints, Lady Margaret. Describe your walk to the conservatory. I walked. I did not run. I was annoyed, not anxious. I opened the door, saw him, and reacted. Did you enter fully? Did you touch anything? I took 2 steps inside. I did not touch Claude. I saw the dagger, the blood, and the scarab was not on his person. The case in the drawing room flashed into my mind. I knew then it was theft as well. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah? You looked for the scarab upon his body? That was your first thought. Upon seeing your brother murdered? Lady Meg met his gaze unflinchingly. In a household ruled by money, Monsieur Poirot, it is often the most logical first thought. Grief can come later. Poirot thanked her. Alone again, he steepled his fingers. Each account was a tile in the mosaic, but the picture remained stubbornly blurred. One person, however, had mentioned a detail that did not align with perception. The little grey cells began to stir. Inspector Granger's moment of triumph arrived shortly after the interviews. A constable, conducting a systematic search of the bedrooms, made a discovery. Hidden in the toe of a winter boot at the back of Lady Margaret Clifford's wardrobe was the sanguine scarab, its ruby eyes gleaming with a baleful light. Grange presented it with the air of a magician producing a rabbit. "What did I tell you, Monsieur Poirot? The evidence is conclusive. She killed him for the inheritance, stole the scarab for added security, and hid it among her things. The impossible snow? A red herring. She was already out there when she found him. The reaction in the library was electric. Lady Meg's face went bone white, not with guilt, but with a fury so intense it seemed to freeze the air around her. That is a lie. A plant. I have not been near my room since last evening. Anyone could have placed it there. A likely story, Grange scoffed. Your footprints are the only ones in the snow. The stolen goods are in your possession. You had motive and opportunity. The case is closed." Dr. Finch whimpered with relief. Hannigan nodded, satisfied. Miss Prentice watched with thoughtful eyes. Eleanor Finch's expression was unreadable. Poirot, who had been examining the magnificent jewel with a detached air, placed it carefully on a table. "It is a pretty bauble indeed, and its discovery is most convenient. Convenient? It's damning." Grange insisted. "Is it?" Poirot's question was a soft dart. "Consider the psychology, Inspector. If Lady Margaret is a clever woman who orchestrates an impossible murder to divert suspicion, why does she then commit the elementary blunder of hiding the stolen object in her own room? The first place anyone would look. It is not logical. It is, in fact, remarkably stupid. Criminals panic. They make mistakes. Certainment. But which category does Lady Margaret fall into? The cool orchestrator of the impossible crime, or the panicking bungler? The two profiles, they do not marry." He turned to the suspect. "Lady Margaret, these boots, they are in current use? They are old walking boots. I keep them for the gardens. Any of the staff, or anyone in this house, would know that. And your room was unlocked? We do not lock bedrooms in this house during the day. It is not a hotel." Poirot gave a small, satisfied nod. "You see, Inspector? The evidence is too obliging. It presents itself with a neatness that continues to offend the sense of order. It shouts when it should whisper. No, the true criminal is more subtle. They use the snow, and now they wish to use the discovery of the scarab to point very loudly away from themselves." Grange was unmoved, his mind settled. "With respect, Monsieur Poirot, that's philosophical flim-flam. I have physical evidence. I'm taking her in." As the inspector led a rigidly silent Lady Meg away, Poirot did not protest further. He knew the arrest was premature, but it created a new dynamic tension. The guilty party would now feel a dangerous security, and with the over-eager Inspector Grange focused on a single tree, Poirot was free to examine the shape of the forest. He returned to the drawing-room window, staring at the winter garden. The snow was beginning to melt at the edges. Soon, the perfect white page would be spoiled. But he had seen what he needed. The solution did not lie in the boot or the jewel, but in the contradiction between two statements, one about the snow and one about the scarab's location. A timeline was forming in his mind, and in it, the moment of impossibility ceased to exist. With Lady Meg's arrest, a fragile, false calm descended upon Westway's manor. The remaining guests were like actors after the lead has been hauled off stage, unsure if the play was over. Poirot, however, was just beginning his performance. He gathered them in the drawing room once more, the very scene of the crime's genesis. He stood before the fireplace, his demeanor one of benign curiosity. "The good inspector is satisfied," he began. "But Hercule Poirot, he is not a simple man. He is plagued by the question of method. Let us put aside the who for a moment. and examine the how. The winter garden is a prison of snow. How did the murderer reach Sir Claude? I have a little idea, but to confirm it, I must ask you to perform a small exercise of the memory. He approached Dr. Finch first. Doctor, you are a man of observation. When Sir Claude left this room, did he carry anything? His hands, were they in his pockets? Finch's eyes darted behind his spectacles. And no. He flung on his coat and went. Empty hands. Merci. He turned to Hannigan. And you, monsieur? As he departed, did he make any gesture? Perhaps adjust his scarf? He just barged out, Hannigan said, shrugging. Typical dramatic exit. Poirot nodded and faced Eleanor Finch. Madam, you were at the window. You saw him walk the path. Did he pause? Did he seem to speak to himself? He walked with purpose. He did not pause. Finally, his gaze settled on Miss Prentice. And you, mademoiselle, you have the most ordered mind. Before he left, did Sir Claude retrieve anything from this room? A cigar, perhaps? A small item? Miss Prentice's brow furrowed in genuine concentration. No, nothing. He was empty-handed. Poirot clasped his hands together, a smile playing on his lips. C'est curieux, n'est-ce pas? For we know one thing was taken from this room to the winter garden, the murder weapon, the Malay kreese. It was on display on that very cabinet. He gestured to an ornate side table. Yet no one saw him take it. And why would he? It is not a cigar case. So, the dagger was already in the conservatory, or it was taken there by someone else before Sir Claude arrived. He let the implication hang in the air. The only person known to have gone to the conservatory after the dagger was seen in the drawing room was Sir Claude himself. Therefore, the weapon must have been placed earlier. Now, Poirot continued, his voice dropping to a conversational tone. Consider the scarab, hidden so obviously in Lady Margaret's boot. A panicked criminal might hide it there, yes, but a clever one, who plants evidence, would choose a place connected to the victim, not themselves, a place that tells a story. For example, the pocket of a coat. He saw it. A minute twitch, a fleeting freeze in the posture of one person in the room. It was not guilt, but alarm, the alarm of a planner who sees their construction being measured with an incorrect ruler. But that is speculation, Poirot said airily, waving a hand. Let us return to the snow, the great impossibility. I put it to you that the murderer did in fact walk to the conservatory. The proof is not in the snow itself, but in the timing. He was watching them all now, a scientist observing reactions. Dr. Finch looked confused, Hannigan impatient, Eleanor Finch wary. But one person's eyes had narrowed slightly, their attention absolute. The falling snow, Poirot murmured, it is not just a blanket. It is a clock, and it tells a different time than the one we have all assumed. Reflect on that, I beg you. We will speak again. With a polite bow, he left the room. He had not accused anyone. He had merely laid out two contradictory truths. The weapon was pre-placed, and the snow could be read. He had, however, planted a seed of profound anxiety in the killer's mind. The psychological game was now in play. The next move, Poirot knew, would likely be a desperate one. The night passed uneasily. Poirot, a light sleeper, was alert to the sounds of the old house, the creak of a floorboard, the sigh of the wind. He anticipated a reaction to his psychological probing, and it came just after dawn. A thunderous crash, followed by a woman's shriek, echoed from the main hall. Poirot, immaculate in his dressing gown, was one of the first to arrive. The scene was one of chaos and potential tragedy. A large oak settle, which normally stood against the wall beneath a minstrel's gallery, had toppled over. Dr. Alexander Finch lay half-pinned beneath it, groaning, a trickle of blood on his temple. Eleanor Finch was on her knees beside him, her icy composure shattered. Hannigan and a frightened footman were heaving the heavy bench upright. He could have been killed. Eleanor cried, her voice raw. "That bench is solid. It doesn't just fall." Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the area. The floor was polished wood. The settle's feet showed no sign of slippage. His gaze traveled upward to the minstrel's gallery, a railed walkway that overlooked the hall. A single faint scuff mark marred the dust on the railing. "He was standing right here," Hannigan panted, helping the dazed archaeologist to a chair. "Said he couldn't sleep, was going for a book." Then bang! "An accident, surely," murmured Miss Prentice, who had appeared fully dressed at Poirot's shoulder. "None," Poirot said quietly but definitively. "It was an attempted correction. The good doctor saw something last night, something his conscious mind has not yet processed, but which the murderer fears he will remember. It was deemed necessary to silence him permanently, under the guise of a domestic accident." Finch, moaning, clutched his head. "I didn't see anything, I don't remember. You will, in time. With rest and safety," Poirot said. He then addressed the footman. "Fetch Inspector Grange from the village at once. Tell him there has been an attempted murder." This declaration sent a new wave of shock through the small group. An attempted murder while a suspect was already in custody shattered Grange's simple theory entirely. While they waited for the inspector, Poirot conducted a swift examination. In the shadows behind the overturned settle, he found not one but two clues. The first was a small, flat button from a man's jacket, torn loose. The second was more telling, a single muddy footprint, partially scuffed, on the polished floor. The tread pattern was distinctive, a diamond grid. It did not match the shoes of any guest currently in the hall, nor the indoor footwear of the staff. The killer had become reckless. The perfect illusion of the snow was crumbling, and in their haste to shore up their position, they had left something far more concrete than a phantom's track. Poirot carefully covered the footprint with a glass vase and pocketed the button. The psychological game had escalated to physical violence. The circle was tightening, and the murderer knew it. Inspector Grange returned to Westways in a foul temper. The attempted murder of Dr. Finch, complete with a cryptic button and a foreign footprint, dismantled his neat case against Lady Margaret. He could not ignore it, yet he clung to his original conclusion. A separate affair. An accomplice, perhaps, trying to tidy up loose ends. Poirot listened with polite patience. An accomplice who wears boots with a diamond tread and loses buttons, while your principal suspect is safely in a cell? It is a theory, Inspector. Privately, Poirot's mind was elsewhere. He had requested, and been granted, a tour of the servants' quarters and outdoor stores. In the gardener's shed, nestled among clay pots and bags of peat, he found it. A pair of well-worn, heavy work boots. He turned one over. The tread was a perfect match to the diamond grid impression left in the hall. They belonged, he was informed, to the under-gardener, a young man named Tom, currently visiting his mother in a neighboring county. The boots had been here, accessible to anyone in the house. The button was more puzzling. It was of good quality, horn, not plastic. It did not match the jacket of any male guest, nor the livery of the footman. Poirot sat in the morning room, the button placed before him on the desk like a sacred relic, and let his little gray cells weave. They returned, persistently, to the timeline, and to the singularly perceptive mind of Miss Caroline Prentice. He recalled her exact words: "I would seek to manipulate the perception of the evidence, to make people believe the snow was undisturbed when it was not." How does one manipulate the perception of snow? The answer, when it came, was dazzling in its simplicity. It did not require complex machinery or supernatural skill. It required only a precise understanding of the weather and the opportunity to be outside before the crime was discovered. A small, seemingly irrelevant comment from Mrs. Henderson, the cook, floated back to him. She had mentioned, while discussing the previous afternoon's preparations, that Miss Prentice had been outside briefly before the snow began in earnest to cut some winter greenery for the hall. The winter garden. She had been in the conservatory. At that moment, the last piece clicked into place. He saw the whole edifice of the crime, not as an impossibility, but as a simple, brutal trick of timing and expectation. The murderer had not walked through the snow to commit the deed. They had walked through the air and let the snow provide the alibi. The stolen scarab, the planted evidence, the attack on Finch, all were desperate actions to protect this central, elegant deception. Poirot knew the truth. He knew the who, the how, and, most importantly, the why that made the horrible logic of it all fall into place. But he said nothing. He merely pocketed the horn button and requested that Inspector Grange gather everyone, including Lady Margaret, who was to be released and brought back from the village, in the library at 7 o'clock that evening. "The case," Poirot announced, "is resolved. I will explain everything." The library at Westways Manor that evening was a theater of tension. A fire crackled in the grate, but it did not dispel the chill of anticipation. Poirot had arranged the room with a director's precision. The suspects were seated in a semicircle facing the hearth. Lady Margaret, pale but defiant, freshly returned from her ordeal. Dr. Finch, head bandaged, shrinking into his chair. Eleanor Finch, a protective arm near her husband, her face a guarded mask. Mr. Hannigan, leaning back with affected nonchalance, and Miss Caroline Prentice, seated very straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Inspector Grange stood by the door, his expression a mixture of skepticism and grudging curiosity. Poirot stood before the fire, his silhouette neat and compact. He waited for absolute silence before he began. "Messieurs, mesdames, we are here to lay to rest the ghost of an impossibility. The death of Sir Claude Weatherby is not the work of a phantom, but of a very human and cunning intelligence. It is a crime built upon two simple, but brilliant, deceptions. The first concerns time. The second concerns substance." He paused, letting his eyes travel over each face. "Let us establish what we know. Sir Claude left this house at approximately 10 o'clock. He was found dead by Lady Margaret some 25 minutes later. The snow, falling steadily, showed only his footprints going out, and hers going to find him. Therefore, the logic screams that no one else could have reached him. My oui, but that logic depends entirely on one assumption, that he was killed during that 25-minute interval." He turned to Lady Margaret. "You, madame, stated something very perceptive. Upon seeing your brother, your first thought was of the scarab. You looked for it. Why? Because the setting, a financial transaction interrupted, suggested theft. The murderer wished us to think that. They took the scarab from the drawing room after Sir Claude left, to reinforce the idea that the murder was about the sale, and that it occurred after he was alone in the conservatory, but that's what happened," insisted Inspector Grange. "Non," said Poirot softly. "What if Sir Claude was already dead when he walked out into the snow?" A baffled silence met this statement. "It is a trick of chronology," Poirot continued. "Consider the weapon. The Malay kriz. No one saw Sir Claude take it. It is not an object one slips into a pocket unnoticed. Therefore it was already in the conservatory. I propose that Sir Claude was lured to the winter garden earlier, perhaps just before the guests assembled after dinner. There he was killed. The murderer then left the weapon in place. But the body was not discovered then. Oh no, the murderer returned to the house, and Sir Claude Weatherby, or rather his corpse, made a second exit, witnessed by you all, at 10 o'clock. That's grotesque. Impossible, gasped Dr. Finch. Is it? You all saw a figure in a greatcoat, hat pulled low, stride out into the snow. You saw his back. You saw his determined walk. But did you see his face? No, you saw what you expected to see, Sir Claude, storming out for his solitary walk. The murderer provided the performance, and your own expectations wrote the script. He turned his gaze slowly, deliberately, towards the figure seated with such impeccable composure. Only one person had the opportunity to be in the conservatory beforehand to set the scene, and the authority to ensure the performance went unchallenged. Only one person could have cut the winter greenery, as was noted, and, in that same visit, commit a murder. And only one person, when asked how they would create the illusion of untouched snow, spoke not of tunnels or ropes, but of manipulating perception. All eyes in the room followed his. They came to rest on Miss Caroline Prentice. She did not flinch. She merely raised her chin a fraction, meeting Poirot's gaze with one of cool, unflinching inquiry. The stage was set. The final act had begun. All eyes were locked on Miss Caroline Prentice. For a moment, she seemed carved from marble. Then, she gave a small, dismissive sigh. A fascinating theory, Monsieur Poirot. But it is pure fantasy. I was in the drawing room with the others before dinner. I did not lure Sir Claude anywhere, and you cannot seriously suggest I impersonated him. The difference in our height, our build, the difference, mademoiselle, was concealed by a greatcoat, a hat, and the perspective of distance, Poirot interrupted, his voice sharpening. You are tall for a woman. Sir Claude was not a large man, merely a loud one. With his coat collar turned up, his hat pulled low, and striding with purpose into the gloom and falling snow, the silhouette was convincing enough. You performed the walk yourself, earlier, to test the illusion, did you not? That is when you left the diamond tread boot print in the hall, wearing the gardener's boots to leave a misleading clue should your snow trick fail. The button, he added, holding up the horn disc, was torn from your own tailored jacket during your struggle with Dr. Finch. A woman's jacket, but a masculine style and button. You are a practical dresser. Inspector Grange sputtered. But the body. If he was already dead in the conservatory, how did she get it there without leaving prints before the snow? Ah. Poirot's eyes glittered. You now ask the correct question. She did not take the body there before the snow. She took it there before the snow began to lie. This is the manipulation of perception. Sir Claude was killed in the conservatory in the late afternoon, when she was ostensibly cutting greenery. The snow was forecast, but had not yet started. She left him there, the dagger in place. Then, she returned to the house. When the snow began, it covered any traces of her earlier visit. It created a fresh blank page. At 10 o'clock, she staged his exit. She simply walked out, turned the corner out of sight, removed the coat and hat, which she had worn over her own clothes, and concealed them among the plants. She then re-entered the house. How? He paused dramatically. She did not walk back through the snow. She walked above it. The winter garden connects to the house not only by the terrace door, but by a second, interior door from Sir Claude's study, a door hidden behind a large planter of ferns. I observed the scrape marks on the floor. That is how she returned, unseen, to the drawing room, to await the discovery of the body she already knew was there. The snow fell, recording only Sir Claude's fictional exit and Lady Margaret's later, genuine approach. The perfect alibi. Lady Meg's hand flew to her mouth. The hidden door. I'd forgotten it existed. It leads from his study to the conservatory heating room. Persisment. The impossible crime was only impossible if one assumed the murderer came from outside. But the murderer was already inside the garden, and returned to the house by a secret route. Poirot advanced towards Miss Prentice. Your motive was not the scarab. That was a blind. Your motive was the power Sir Claude held over you. Not merely employment, but the truth about your brother. It was not just fraud, was it? Sir Claude did not merely know of it. He had engineered it. He ruined your brother to gain leverage over you, to secure your brilliant, ruthless mind in his service. For 7 years you endured this. But recently, you learned he planned to discard you, and to publicly reveal the truth, destroying what remained of your family's name. You decided to act. Miss Prentice had not moved. Her composure was terrifying. "Prove it," she said, her voice low and clear. "The scarf," Poirot said. "When I arrived, you took my coat and placed my scarf upon it. You arranged it with a precise, folded symmetry. A harmless fastidiousness? Perhaps. But when I examined Sir Claude's body in the cold larder, I noted his scarf was still knotted tightly around his neck, under his coat collar. A man putting on a heavy coat in a hurry to walk in the snow does not first meticulously knot his scarf underneath the collar. He throws it on after. That scarf was knotted by someone else, someone arranging his appearance after he was already dead and prone, someone with a mania for neatness. That someone is you, mademoiselle." For the first time, a crack appeared. A tiny muscle twitched in her jaw. You took the scarab after the exit to create the theft motive. You hid it in Lady Margaret's boot, framing the obvious suspect. When I began to question the timeline, you realized Dr. Finch might recall seeing you near the study door earlier in the evening. So you attempted to kill him, staging an accident and planting the button and boot print to suggest an outside accomplice, further muddying the waters. Poirot stood before her now. It was a cool, clever plan. But it had 2 flaws. First, it was too neat. Life is not so symmetrical. Second, and most fatally, you underestimated the psychology. You could not resist making the scene perfect, the arranged scarf, the untouched snow, the blatantly planted jewel. You imposed your own order upon the chaos of murder. And that, Mademoiselle Prentice, is what betrayed you to Hercule Poirot. The silence in the library was absolute. Then, Miss Caroline Prentice did something astonishing. She smiled. It was a small, grim, but genuinely relieved smile. "The scarf," she murmured. "Yes, I knew it should look proper. After all that planning, a detail so small." She looked at Poirot and gave a slight, respectful nod. "You are as meticulous as they say, monsieur. I am glad it is over." The constant ordering of his chaos, it was exhausting. She stood, turning calmly to Inspector Grange. "I will make a full statement. There is no need for theatrics." Miss Caroline Prentice's confession was as precise and unemotional as her crime. She detailed how Sir Claude's own secret door and the predictable snowfall had formed the architecture of her plan. The scarab was recovered from police evidence. Lady Margaret was formally exonerated. At the subsequent trial, the cold, premeditated nature of the act, coupled with the testimony of her brother's ruin, resulted in a sentence of life imprisonment. Poirot followed the case, but noted with sadness that no one spoke of the true tragedy. 2 brilliant minds, one consumed by greed for power, the other by a desire for a perfect, cruel order, both ultimately destroyed by their own flaws. A week later, Poirot was in his London apartment, straightening a stack of papers. His friend Hastings, having read the sensational reports, was full of questions. But Poirot, the snow, it still seems like magic. "Mon ami," Poirot said, carefully aligning a pencil with the edge of the blotter. The greatest magic trick is not performed with wands and smoke. It is performed with the expectations of the audience. They see the snow, they think barrier. They see a walking figure, they think living man. The criminal, she did not fight against the conditions. She used them. She made the snow her accomplice. But in doing so, she forgot one thing. "What's that?" asked Hastings. "That the human mind, it is the greatest mystery of all. And it has a tendency," he added, with a final, satisfied tweak to the pencil, "to be overly tidy. A fatal flaw. For those who believe murder can be made neat,